All I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
The next principle I call giving up your personal history. And I learned it from a man named Carlos Castaneda, who once said that one day, he said, I finally realized that I no longer needed a personal history. And just like drinking, he said, I gave it up. And that, and only that, has made all the difference in the world. You know the nice thing about giving up your personal history? Is that if you don't have a story, you don't have to live up to it. All of us have these bags of manure that we carry around with us, called our past, and the people who have done things to us, and the events and the circumstances, all of this stuff that we use and we bond to. And we bond ourselves to these wounds of our past, and we identify ourselves on the basis of these wounds. And every once in a while we set it down and we reach in there and we smear it all over ourselves. And then we wonder, why does my life smell so bad? I don't understand this. When in fact, the now, this moment, merging yourself into the now, means that you may have been in a relationship. I had a woman from Holland who came over to see me, whose husband had left her after 25 years. She had 4 children, and she just had been on the verge of suicide. And she was losing weight, and she was depressed, and she was taking all kinds of drugs for it, and she was getting sicker and sicker because she just couldn't get over it. And she came to a book signing that I was doing at a bookstore down in Florida. And she said, you've got to say something to me. You've got to say something to me that will help me to get over this. And I told her this line. I said, give up your personal history. Merge yourself here, now, into this moment. And those 25 years are something, if you want to understand how to do it, think of your past as, oh, this hat. And this is your past. Now, you can't just set this thing down over here and walk away from it and give up your personal history, because you'll always have it there to look back at. What you do is you pick up your past and you embrace it. You understand it, you accept it as I had to go through these things that I had to go through in order for me to get to this place today. And the evidence for that is that I did. You don't need any more evidence. You did. And then you toss it. You toss it. You embrace it and you toss it. And you merge into the now by giving up your attachment. And some of you have heard me use the metaphor of the wake. Alan Watts talked about the wake is not what drives the boat. The wake is just a trail that is left behind. That's all it is. And so is the wake of your life. And the wake doesn't make the boat go, and neither does the wake of your life, the reason why your life is going in the direction that it is. The wake is a trail that is left behind, and it's an illusion to believe that it is the cause of your suffering or your struggles or your difficulty. Give it up. Let it go. Embrace it, understand it, get help doing that if you must, and then move into the now. The next principle I call, it's from a line of Albert Einstein. He said, you can't solve a problem with the same mind that created it. In order to work at solving these things called problems in your life, you have to change your mind. It is your mind where they live. It is your mind that created them. There is where you experience them. They're all illusions. You must change your mind. Literally rewrite your agreement with reality. One of the things I had said earlier is that one of the most difficult things to do in the world is to admit that you were wrong. Admitting that you were wrong is nothing more than saying, I have been making choices with my mind that have created things in my life that are not working. And I no longer intend to continue making those choices. I was wrong. You don't have to make a declaration of it. You don't have to go out and feel guilty about it. You just simply say, it didn't work. The relationship that I was in before, I behaved in these ways. I didn't realize that it wasn't working for me. Now I do, and this is where I choose to be now. The secret of a successful relationship is, to me, understanding that you put your attention and your energy in a person on what you love rather than what you don't love. Robert Frost said it so beautifully. We love the things we love for what they are. For what they are. Not for what they ought to be, not for what they used to be, but for what they are. So when you look into the eyes of a person you're in a relationship with, whether it's your children, you catch them doing things right as much as you possibly can. That's oftentimes takes a lot of hunting, but you'll find it. And when you think that my relationship isn't working, remember, it's in my mind. What am I thinking about that person? And if I could just change my mind and put my thoughts on what I love about this person and keep them there, that makes the relationship flourish. And there are people who go through their entire relationship history with no anger, no hatred, no bitterness, and only love. The next principle is, I call it treating yourself as if you already were what you would like to become. In other words, you get out in front of your life and you see yourself as having already what you know you'd like to have and deserve to have. My children know how to do this perfectly. I have a daughter who wanted a prom dress, and the prom dress was way outside the budget that I thought a prom dress should be. I thought a prom dress shouldn't cost over $20, so I do have a problem, right? But I upped it to somewhere around $250. I don't know how much, whatever. To me, it was still more than I paid for my first house, okay? But anyway, she called and said, Dad, this is the only prom dress I could wear. I've got to wear this prom dress. If I don't wear this prom dress, it's just on and on and on with this wonderful. You know, I saw a wonderful book about how to raise teenage daughters. The title of it is Get Out of My Life. But first, drive me and Cheryl to the mall. All right, that's the actual title. It's a good book. And so I told Serena, I said, it's just beyond the budget. I've got a certain amount of money that I'm willing to put for it. And she said, but I've already seen myself wearing it. I've already tried it on. I have a picture of myself in the dress in my living room, and I've already showed it to the guy who was taking me to the prom. I mean, it was this whole thing about, and she already saw herself in it. I said, well, if you see yourself in it, then you're going to have to also see yourself as earning the difference between what I'm willing to pay. And she drew up a contract. She went onto the computer, and on the background of the computer, you know, where they have these little background things they put on, there was 500 pictures of the dress, all right? And she signed a contract and said, I'll babysit, I'll do this, I'll do that, and I will pay the difference. And she did. And she wore the dress because she understood that you treat yourself as if you already are what you'd like to become. There's a genius in you. You have to treat yourself as if you already were that genius. There's something you're completely capable of. See yourself as already there. Then you'll act upon those thoughts, because the ancestor to every action, said Emerson, is a thought. The next principle is called treasuring your divinity. Treasuring your divinity. There's a wonderful observation that I saw from Emerson in Self-Reliance. It's about trusting your divinity, knowing that you are connected to your source, knowing that you are a divine creation and that there are no accidents. He said, a man should learn to detect and watch that gleam of light which flashes across his mind from within, more than the luster of the firmament of bards and sages. Yet he dismisses without notice his own thought, because it's his own. In every work of genius, we recognize our own rejected thoughts. They come back to us with a certain alienated majesty. We often reject our thoughts, and we see the things that we think of as grand and as genius, and we reject them because they're our own. Treasuring our divinity instead of being terrified of it. Knowing that I am always connected to my source. There is no way that I cannot, because it is in you, and I am in you, and you are in me, and you can never be separated from it. There is no place that this source is not. It grows everybody's fingernails. It beats everybody's hearts. It digests everybody's foods. It opens all the flowers. and you're always connected to it. And finally, the last principle I call wisdom is avoiding all thoughts which weaken you. You know, every thought has an energy, just like everything else in the universe. And if you have a thought of shame, it will weaken your muscles. And what is your heart but a muscle? If you raise a child to believe in shame and feel ashamed of themselves, every time they think that shameful thought, they will be weakened. And if you have a thought of fear, and if you have a thought of stress, and you have a thought of anguish and anxiety, all of these thoughts and many more are the thoughts that will always weaken you. When you are having a thought that you know is disempowering you, shift it. Shift it to one that is empowering rather than disempowering. And the thoughts that empower are thoughts of neutrality and willingness and love, and ultimately thoughts of divinity. And when you see a troubled person who is out there struggling at the highest level of unity consciousness or God consciousness or spiritual consciousness, you recognize yourself in all that you see. There, but for the grace of God, go I. And I am connected to that person. Changing your thoughts. I appeared on the Tonight Show many years ago, several times, quite a few times. And I remember coming home from the Tonight Show, and I was walking along the beach, and they had taped the show the night before, and I was out for a walk, and a woman who lived in the Northeast stopped me, and she said, "Didn't I see you last night on the, how could you be here?" I said, "Well, I flew the red eye, and I was walking along." And she said, "You know, we're moving down here." She said, "What are the people like here? What's it like?" And I said to her, I said, "Well, what are they like where you live?" She said, "Well," she said, I live in a very big city." And she said, "They're very pushy. And people are not very kind. And they don't have time for you." And she said, "It's really not very pleasant." She said, "That's one of the reasons I'm leaving there." I said, "Well, that's pretty much what you're going to find here." That's basically what the people are like here. On the way back on the same day, someone else who had seen me the night before on the Tonight Show, who had lived in the Midwest, stopped me and asked me almost the same question. She said, "You live here?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Well, my husband and I are moving here and we're looking for a school." She said, "What are the people like here? What's it like here?" I said, "What are they like in Chicago where you live?" She said, "It's the Midwest." She said, "People are very friendly, they're open, they open their homes to you, they're very loving, they're very kind." She said, "It's a wonderful place." She said, "I love that, I'm going to really miss that." I said, "That's pretty much what you're going to find here." It's what you expect, it's what you think about that expands. It's what Emerson taught us. The ancestor to every action is a thought. Change your thoughts, and you change your world. Change your expectations, and you change around what you begin to manifest and see showing up in your life.
All I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
The false self is the ego. The ego is the part of us that has come to believe that who I am is defined by these 6 things. Who I am is what I have. And so we spend a big hunk of our life attempting to get as much stuff as we possibly can. The Tao teaches something very different. Let go of everything you have. When I moved to Maui in 2005 full time, I gave up everything that I owned. Everything. 20,000 books, all of my photographs, records of every description, furniture, all the things in the house. All my clothing, shoes, it was all donated to people who lived on underneath a bypass in Florida. And let go of all of it. So the ego teaches us you are what you have. The Tao teaches us let go of everything that you have. Do less and accomplish more. One of Lao Tzu's most famous observations was, "I do nothing and leave nothing undone." My son has taken to becoming a spiritual Taoist. Every time I tell him to do something, he says, I do nothing. And I leave nothing undone. But there's much wisdom in that. I could go on into that. The second thing that the ego teaches us is that who I am is not only what I have, but who I am is what I do, what I accomplish. And so we spend a big hunk of our lives believing that the way that we become, quote, successful, happy, fulfilled, self-actualized, whatever it might be, is on the basis of what I accomplish, what my resume looks like, how many promotions I get. And so we send our children off to school and we ask them to learn to identify themselves on how much they get and what they accomplish. Your grades become more important than what it is that you are studying. What you own, what clothes you wear, what labels you have, and so on. And we become obsessed with this kind of absurdity. And this is the false self at work. The third thing that the ego teaches us is that I am what other people think of me. I am my reputation. So becoming obsessed with our reviews, what people think of us, other people's opinions, getting the approval of others. We talk about peer group approval needs and so on. I have 8 children that aren't concerned about those things. They were never raised with that kind of a mentality. The whole idea of, trying to please other people was something that they consistently heard from their mother and myself, that this isn't important to us. We're not attached to that. And this kind of an attachment. So the Tao teaches us that what you think of me is none of my business. What the ego teaches us is that what you think of me is the most important thing that I have, and so I'll do whatever it is that I need to do in order to get you to agree with me, to like me, to approve of me, and so on. The fourth thing that the ego teaches us, this false self, is that who I am is separate from everyone else. And so we are raised in this world of the false self, which teaches us that we have to be in competition with everyone else. We have to defeat someone else. Being number one is the most important thing, and you see people doing this all the time at football games and and you'll see it when the Olympics come up, that the gold medal is more important than anything else, and you'll see people weeping and sobbing over this idea that I have to be better than somebody else in order to be fulfilled in my life. The fifth thing that the ego teaches us is that I am separate not only from everybody else, but that I am separate from what's missing in my life. The Tao teaches us that there is no place that God is not. If there is no place that God is not, then God must be in you. And if there is no place that God is not, then God must also be in all that I perceive to be missing from my life. And therefore, in order to become a manifester and to attract into my life what I want, I simply have to realign myself. I have to rejoin. I have to yoga myself to God. And the most egregious error of the ego is a belief system that says that who I am is separate from God. That God is something outside of me. We have not been raised to understand and believe that at our basic core, what Lao Tzu called our original nature, what we are is love. And all we have to do is be that and live that. There was a great Indian poet. His name was Rabindranath Tagore. And he received the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1913 for a collection of poetry called the Gitanjali. And in that poem, that long poem, 90-some verses, one of those verses says this. He's speaking of the ego. He said, I went out alone on my way to my tryst. But who is this me in the dark? I step aside to avoid his presence, but I escape him not. He makes the dust rise from the earth with his swagger. He adds his loud voice to every word I utter. He is my own little self, my Lord. He knows no shame, but I am ashamed to come to thy door in his company. That's a great poet. And that's a great piece of truth. That in order to get to this place, I speak about, that Maslow spoke to me about and trained me to think about, called self-actualization, is that we have to stop evaluating who we are on the basis of those ego identifiers, and instead begin to see ourselves as divine love, as pieces of God. The Native Americans used to say that no tree has branches so foolish as to fight among themselves. And look at us. Look at what happened just down the road from here in Colorado a few days ago. What is it about us that we have to create instruments of death in order to feel good about ourselves? What is it about us that we have to destroy each other and be in competition with each other and even create things called weapons? It's why Lao Tzu left the place where he left in ancient China in the time of the Warring States. And a big part of the Tao, something like 31 verses out of the 81 verses, speak to the absurdity of having weapons and killing each other. He said that every death in battle should not be celebrated, but should be mourned, because it gives evidence that we have not reached this place and understand what T.S. Eliot was speaking, this place from which we originated, this place to which we shall return. From A Course in Miracles, I jotted this down the other day. The memory of God comes to the quiet mind. It cannot come where there is conflict. A mind at war with itself remembers not eternal gentleness. What you remember is a part of you, for you must be as God created you. Let all this madness be undone for you, and return in peace to the remembrance of God, still shining in your quiet mind. Coming to know God, it's not about discovering something that resides outside of you. It's about remembering what's inside of you and living from that place. I don't believe that God is interested in us loving God. I believe God is interested in us loving each other and figuring out a way to do this regardless.
All I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
That everything in the universe is energy and is impacted by the speed at which we calibrate. And all of us can raise the level at which we vibrate in our lives. All of us can do it simply by changing our thoughts, by practicing meditation, by listening to different kind of music, by being in energy fields where we have a knowing, where we reconnect to God, where we make conscious contact with our source. We can change the energy level at which we are living. And getting to a place where you understand that, it's why I like to bring people out, demonstrate to them. The food that we eat
the substances that we put in our bodies. My teacher once said to me that if you want to reach the levels of being able to perform miracles and attract miracles into your life, you have to purify this temple that you live in. And your temple, the temple that you live in, is something that was intended into this universe with perfection. It isn't spirituality in this presentation here today is not about what church you attend and what scriptures you read. It's about how you stay connected to the perfection from which you were intended in the very first place. And I'd like you to really understand that. And when you do, you'll understand that anything that you do that is self-defeating to this temple, as the Sufis used to say, if you don't have a temple in your heart, you'll never find your heart in a temple. And it's about having a temple in your heart. It's about staying connected. And when you do, exercise becomes a regular part of your life. It's a spiritual experience. The foods that you eat become a spiritual experience. The music that you listen to becomes a spiritual experience. The books that you allow into your home, the programs that you allow to be on your television set, the kinds of ideas that you read in newspapers. So it's this force and counterforce thing. Now, that when you have compassion in your heart for those who are operating or living at lower levels. And I remember the story that I heard shortly after the World Trade Center disaster, and it was of grandfather talking to his grandson. And the grandson was looking up at his grandpa, and his grandpa said, he said, I feel as if I have two wolves barking inside of me. He said the first wolf is filled with anger and hatred and bitterness and mostly revenge. And then he said, I have a second wolf barking inside of me who is filled with love and kindness and compassion and even forgiveness. And the grandson looked up at his grandpa and said, which wolf do you think will win, Grandpa? And his grandfather responded, whichever one I feed. And we have to look at what we feed internally in ourselves. Because every time we use force, and what we were talking about at lunch today, it's like, what do you do, someone asked me, with a man who represents these lower energies, like a Saddam Hussein or an Adolf Hitler? What we do is we have to learn inch by inch that humanity has to grow, and that inside each and every body there are cells. And every now and then a cell will enter into the body that doesn't want to cooperate with the cells adjacent to it. It wants to start gobbling them up. We call these cancers. We call these illnesses. We call these arthritises. We call them blood diseases and so on. And this cell that doesn't want to cooperate with the cell adjacent to it and has no connection to the whole will start gobbling up every cell. And eventually it's a very stupid organism because it will destroy the very host that it needs in order for it to survive itself. It will kill itself as well. It will have no more host on which it can live. So a cancer cell is a very stupid cell indeed. It destroys itself by destroying that which is next to it. But we don't go in and bomb the whole body. We just carve it out, or we isolate it. So it's a difference in a shift. Now, when we move from 200 up into the 300s and up into the 400s and 500s, what happens is we begin to make a shift away from force, and we begin to respond with higher and higher levels of awareness and higher levels of consciousness. And as we do, we make a shift in the impact that we have on other people. When you begin to move your energy level above 200, you shift and make a difference in the impact that you have on those people around you. So that when someone at 300, 400, or 500
at these calibration levels who is using the energy of love and kindness and forgiveness and peace and so on, when these people are in your presence, they make a very significant difference in how you react to them and on even the ability to manifest and attract abundance into one's life or healing. So that here's how it works. A person who is below 200 is someone who is moving against, who has to have an enemy, is someone who drains power, is always looking for energy from someone else, is trying to take it away from you. This is someone who needs to argue. This is someone who needs to prove a point. This is someone who needs to make you feel worse about yourself. And generally when you're in the energy field of someone below 200, when they leave your energy space, when they leave the field that you are in them with them, you feel worse about yourself. You feel drained for having been in their experience. You feel weakened, and you feel as if you need to get away from that because they are drainers of energy. They take, and they need to confront, and they need to have an argument. Now, the difference is that a person above 200, particularly in the 300 and 400 range, is a person who never drains, but instead is someone who supplies energy. And when you're in the energy field of someone like this, they make you feel better about yourself. You not only feel better about yourself, but for having been in the presence of that person, you feel energized rather than having been depleted of your energy. Do you see the difference? You feel as if you can do things. You feel as if there's nothing that can stop you. You feel as if you've been awakened. You feel as if everything is going to work. And you have a sense of faith and a sense of beauty and a sense of knowing that there's goodness in the world. But mostly you have a good feeling about yourself. And it's all because of being in the energy field of someone who calibrates to a higher frequency. They don't take, they give. They don't argue, they supply. They don't want from you, they offer you. People will say to me over and over and over again, I understand what you're saying. It makes a lot of sense. And I, of course, am operating at a much higher level than all of those people around me. And the people who really need to hear this message are not here today. They're back home watching a football game or whatever it is that they're doing. But they obviously wouldn't even come to this because I'm at such a much higher spiritual level. But I'm in the energy field of people who are always bringing me down. They're cruel. They're nasty. They're inconsiderate. They're not compassionate. They're vicious. They're hateful. They're any number of things that I don't want or can't tolerate in my life. And they bring me down. You've heard it, you've said it. They bring me down. My husband doesn't understand me. My boss doesn't get it. The people around me don't get it. It's a lousy, hateful world out there. There's a lot of people out there who are mean. There are a lot of people who are represented by those people that we quote call our enemies and so on. And I'm in that energy field and I can't help but being brought down. And I always ask myself, and I respond to that with, imagine how Jesus would respond to such an observation. I don't want to be over there with all of those thieves. You know, I can't go over there. I just can't be around them because they just bring me down. And you laugh because it's too absurd. They're just filthy. Those are just people that, they bring me down, so I stay away from them. I don't want to be around them. That wasn't his way. And I suggest to you that the reason that people with lower energies bring you down is not because it is them that are bringing you down, but it is because you join them in responding to them with the same energy that you despise. So if someone hates you and you hate them for hating you, you have responded to force with a counterforce. Anything above 200 is power. It's empowerment. Anything below 200 is force. If you get angry at somebody for being angry at you, if you get upset with somebody who is upsetting, if you get hateful towards someone who is acting hateful towards you, in your thoughts or in your actions, that is what it is that is bringing you down. But if you learn something else, something that St. Francis taught us in this prayer of St. Francis, indeed, there is a spiritual solution to every problem. And energy moves from slow to high and low to fast, or reverse that, slow to fast and low to high. And that the lowest energies are the energies of the world of the physical. This hand looks like a solid mass, but if you look at it under a microscope, you know that it's not a solid mass. It's nothing but a bunch of molecules and atoms and subatomic particles all moving about. You know that. You know that inside there, despite what your eyes tell you, that inside here there is nothing but energy. And I've said a lot of things, and if there was an audiologist out there who was going to give you the energy report of the sound that was in this room, and an iridologist who was going to give you a report on all of the light in this room, you would discover that there are no problems in anything that was said or anything that you have seen. There are no problems in it. All they would do is show you, well, here's the energy. It would be a big scroll. They'd pull it out on an oscilloscope, and it would go like this, and then he said this, and then he said this, and you'd say, well, wait a minute, I thought maybe I heard him swear once, and that really kind of upset me. That was really a problem. And they'd say, no, can't find it in here. No, it's not in the report. The report just shows energy, but I didn't like that. Well, it's not in the report, because energy has no problems. It's only when we take it in and process it that it becomes a problem for us. There's no problems out there. And every problem that we have is located back here in this lowest energy field of all, the energy of the solid.